Get to the big three.
Number 3.
Republicans are really beginning to learn how bad the big ugly bill is for them. Republican senators are airing deep concerns behind closed doors, but they're not being honest at home to their constituents.
Believe me, it's not anything that Democrats could be happy about. Big, beautiful bill careening way through the Senate. Senator Thune says we're going to stay through the holidays until we can get a version to the House. How does the House feel about some of the changes? Many are not happy.
Number 2.
We have won because New Yorkers have stood up for a city they can afford. Will use their power to reject Donald Trump's fascism, to stop mass ICE agents from deporting our neighbors.
Stunning upset in New York City primary. Andrew Cuomo goes down in flames, loses by about 100,000 votes to upstart, unknown, radical socialist Zohran Mamdani. Bernie Sanders and AOC couldn't be happier, which makes me very sad. Good news for Curtis Sliwa, the Republican, and Eric Adams, the Independent.
Number 1.
And the thing that hurts me is it's really demeaning to the pilots and the people that put that whole thing together, the generals. That was a perfect operation.
That was a perfect operation, but how effective it was now has people in the Defense Department questioning it. The strike in Iran's under scrutiny. Deep State maximized the strike on nuke sites and minimizes it. Says it was no big deal. Really? Don't get distracted. It was a huge deal. And you know who knows it? The Iranians. You know who confirmed it? The Israelis. But one thing they did immediately after the strike, within I think the next day, was they hit our base in Qatar. What happened was interesting is the militias who hit our base in Iraq after the killing of the mastermind of the Iraqi of the Al-Quds force was the fact is they didn't. Militias didn't act. Surrogates did not act. Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah, as well as the Houthis. Why is that? Are they not capable, or they don't want to be backing up Iran that didn't back them up? Let's bring in on Zoom Colonel C.J. Douglas. Colonel, welcome back. You've been at the base in Qatar. Are you surprised that the missile defense was more than able to knock down these rockets?
Hi, Brian. Great to talk to you again. No, I'm not surprised at all. I mean, we're confident in the system and in the service members that are employing it, and in our relationship with our partners in the region that are all part of the multilateral defense.
Where were they? How much warning did they get? Do you know?
So, Brian, while I'm not aware of how much they got, as we can see, it was enough that, coupled with the defense systems, that it was effective to negate any U.S. casualties.
How worried were you about the militias in Iraq lining up our guys at the bases in Iraq?
That's a good question, Brian. And so, I can't say that I was specifically concerned about any one group, because quite frankly, there were enough threats everywhere. Now, that said, each time was different, as you're probably alluding to, the 2015-16 timeframe. That really was the complex time, because, as you recall, the Biden administration delayed action, which gave Iran the ability to put advisors. And, we saw that's where the rise of Kataib Hezbollah, the Quds Force, etc., specifically in Al Anbar province, which, as you and I have talked about before, that's what we saw. And we did see, we did have conflict with them, although the main conflict was with ISIS. So while, it was in the back of my mind, but it wasn't, there was enough to think about security and offensive action for enough threats that for that, it was just another threat like anything else.
So what do you think the reason is that that Iran didn't have any of their surrogates acting at all against Israel and didn't act against our troops, being that after Soleimani was taken out, the Iraqi base was rocketed?
Right. I mean, there could be a number of reasons. I mean, I think probably maybe the most simplistic one is, the overwhelming response. I mean, the administration and the service members demonstrated that we could fly around the globe at night and strike at will deep into their homeland. So, that said, I mean, I think we all knew that they had to do a response, and they did, and it was negated. So, as far as why they haven't, it could just be tactical patience. It could be that they're aligning with any number of, as you've talked about previously, any number of the military age males that have come across our southern border, that it could be an attack on the homeland. We don't know. History will determine what that why there wasn't a response.
So what do you think it is that since you were there, how many times were you in Iraq?
3.
How many times in Afghanistan?
Twice.
So how different is it now with Syria now in the hand out of the hands of Assad, no longer a surrogate of Iran? And how different is it now that Iran seems to be cut down to size and they play such a outsized influence in Iraq? How different are things in those two countries now?
Well, I think, it's not just those two countries. I think it's regionally. Iran has been the big bully of the region. And so, Israel has showed that through, tenacity and physical, presence and they've gone after, the big bully in the region. Nobody wants to align with them, obviously, but with that, I think that, what hopefully will come out of this as we start to look towards diplomacy and what the president, right now as he's forward is hopefully we'll look to build coalitions with the Europeans and regional partners. And then there'll be a unified message on human rights and civil liberties in Iran. And so hopefully what we'll see come out of it is so there's right now we haven't seen attacks from any of the proxies. And so maybe that will facilitate some sort of peaceful resolution where we can see a stable Middle East.
Do you think, what is your assessment of the Department of the Defense Intelligence Agency coming forward, even though it's low confidence, with not much damage done after the biggest bombs were dropped, non-nuclear bombs on the planet, multiple bombs on 3 separate sites? What is your assessment of how that got out and the damage it's done?
So I don't think we can determine how much damage, their assessment has done. I think we have to look at, why it was released and who released it and really, it seemed, I don't think, given the magnitude of the strikes, I'm surprised that they're saying that there wasn't, that much damage. I think I've seen, even on Fox, there was, a report of, trucks lined up prior to. And I mean, knowing what we know about our intelligence community, that, we wouldn't have just let those trucks go away unless there was a reason. Now, going back to the strikes, I think this is another one that time is going to tell. And as I mentioned, diplomacy. I think that one of the things that is going to have to come forward out of this is there's going to have to be some sort of independent group that goes in and looks at what their capabilities are and what limitations they have for future.
Here's what Victor Davis Hanson said as the new situation and what the Israelis have actually accomplished along with us. Cut 17.
We've lived in a 50-year myth, a Potemkin myth about the Iranians, that they had this indomitable army and Hezbollah was these goose-stepping Nazi killers. And whether it was a Marine barracks or killing Americans in Iraq, we were always told, you can't do this to Iran because they're indomitable. And in 12 days, Israelis blew up that myth, and Trump put the coup de grace on it. They have no air defenses. They have no air force. They have no top physicists. As you said, the top leadership is in hiding. The generals have been killed off. The Hezbollah is a shambles, maimed, dead, or in hiding. There is no Hamas, really. The Houthis want to make a deal. There's no Syria anymore, no platform for their supplies. Russia's been kicked out. This is just a miraculous development. It's a whole new Middle East, and here the left can't even appreciate what's happened.
Victor Davis Hanson is not one for hyperbole. He's a historian, a military historian. There's nothing he said that was anything but accurate. Don't you agree?
Oh, I would absolutely agree. And one of the things to think about is, I mean, you look at, historically, I mean, they took a pretty good beating when they fought Iran. Now, that said, they didn't go into submission. So, while all this was successful and while, I agree with everything he said, and in the way forward, I think we stay away from regime change. I mean, because what we don't want to do is make a martyr out of, the supreme leader. And I think and it goes away from, the US's only goal is to deny people nuclear weapons, which they and others have, and also execute regime change with people they don't like. It's like, hey, you fix this. The next thing is, all the senior leadership. I mean, the Israel strikes were phenomenal, and you've talked about that. The thing to remember is that there's levels deep. The best analogy I can give you was when we were, each of the commanders courses that I went to in the Marine Corps. The senior leader that came in was the commandant. Two separate commandants, and as they, you're all like, hey, we're now senior leaders, and it's like, hey, make no mistake, congratulations, but if a bus of you all went off a cliff, we'd have you replaced tomorrow. Well, it's the same thing there. It might not be somebody who has the experience. It might be somebody who frankly is the next Patton in Iran. That said, I agree with everything that Victor Davis Hanson said.
Yeah, they're going to be replaced, but they've been assassinated. They all got to check their phone to the location, who's driving them, following them, because the Israelis have penetrated every aspect of Iranian society. And there was a report today in the Israel news that about 700 people have been rounded up in Iran and hung. They say they affiliated with or directly with the Israelis. So they have paid a price for that, if that report is indeed true. Thanks so much, Colonel Douglas. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, Brian. And one last thing, though, Brian, with that report, I mean, and I hope this is something that the administration and others capitalize on. The fact that I'm hearing it here and we're not hearing it on other news stations, like, we've got to amplify the voices of those Iranian dissidents so that they, that their story's told. Thanks very much for having me on, Brian.
You got it.
Deborah Haynes from Sky News. Mark Rutte, the NATO chief, who is your friend, he called you daddy earlier. Do you regard your NATO allies as kind of children?
No, he likes me. I think he likes me. If he doesn't, I'll let you know. I'll come back and I'll hit him hard, okay? No?
But do you
he did it very affectionate. Daddy, you're my daddy.
That was. Were you watching the press?
Marco Rubio was cracking up behind him. I mean, Marco Rubio had such a game face on the whole time, and then he was like.
So Martha MacCallum's here. Martha, so that I didn't see the press conference. I'm doing the show at the same time.
Yeah.
You said there were a few things to emerge from that press conference that you think were noteworthy.
Yeah, I think so. I was watching it along with Bill Maluzhin and Dana live, and I think a couple of things. I think that the major take, obviously, as President Trump said moments ago, it's only been a couple of days. There is no full assessment other than what we can all see very clearly is massive destruction. And I interviewed the IAEA chief yesterday who said, there is significant damage to these sites. And he said there's Iran before that strike and there's Iran after. And there's no better evidence of that, I don't think, Brian, than Iran's own posture before and after the strike. What did they do before? They were, bombing everybody and building a nuclear program. What are they doing after? They basically, the war ended. They agreed to a ceasefire almost immediately after they looked at what happened in that strike. And not only that, they gave us a heads up. Gee, we have to essentially, here's what they're saying. For our own to save face at home, we have to retaliate to you, but we're going to be sending missiles to Qatar, to the biggest base you have. And we want you to know before we do it, because they don't want to kill any Americans, because they don't want to incite more war, because they're on their backs.
So do you think that, and by the way, I want you to hear that comment. Here's cut 10.
The Iranian nuclear program has been set back significantly. It is clear that there is one Iran before June 13, nuclear Iran, and one now. And it's night and day. It's a new reality now. Iran has far less capabilities than it had in the past.
So, Martha, do you think that if CNN or New York Times got a hold of a DIA report that says they've been obliterated, there's nothing left, they went inside, do you think they would have rushed to publish that? Do you think they would have rushed to broadcast that?
No. I mean, I think sadly, what is very obvious is that there are certain interpreters of what happened who are just hoping for a way to minimize it and to make it look like it didn't work. Because unless Iran starts sending us a very different signal, oh, look, you didn't get it. And there is a legitimate question about these 900 pounds of 60% enriched uranium. Now, when I spoke to the IAEA chief yesterday, he said that Iran told him prior to this attack that they were going to move some of that 60% enriched uranium to a safe site. And we also heard that Khamenei put that out. I mean, who knows if you can believe anything he says, because he's constantly, death to America and everything else. Hard to tell if what he says is true. We don't know if they succeeded in moving that material out to a different site. It is possible. It's only been 3 days. We don't know absolutely everything about what happened here, and I think that will emerge. The president said something also today. He said, well, we know because people have been on the site and they've confirmed it. Now, I'm trying to figure out where that's coming from. There are some suggestions that Israelis have been on the site. We know how good their intel's been in Iran lately, but I'm looking for confirmation from the IAEA today that yes, Israelis have been on the site or they've been on the site and have had a close, first person look, but we're still working on that.
Yeah, I just to tell you that there was a report out there from the Israeli news that I just sent over to you that said that they're trying to track down the spies in their midst, and Iran may have arrested and hung 700 people who they think who were collaborating with Israel, including 3 Mossad agents.
I mean, that's another indication of just how strung out they are in the leadership in Iran.
I mean, it's just who they are. And I think people are frustrated. We know that they hate the president. And it's, look, they're an extension. They are the left wing of the Democrat Party. And the Democrat Party right now, they have no positive agenda for the country. They are a party of anger and hate. They hate the president. We just saw an incredible military strike that successfully took out Iran's nuclear weapons capability. And what are the Democrats doing this week? They're voting on trying to disapprove President Trump defending America. And Jesse, one of the important things to understand, the attack that President Trump carried out this weekend, yes, it was supporting our friend and ally Israel, but much more importantly, it was defending America. Because when the Ayatollah chants death to America, I believe him.
Right. So Ted Cruz just talking about how the senator from Texas, Martha MacCallum, was just how the media is going out of their way to immediately say, number one, shouldn't have taken the strike. Number two, it wasn't effective, and they don't have a plan. You saw Mark Kelly last night. First time I saw that soundbite with Brett. Oh, they don't have no plan. They don't know what they're doing. It's chaos. So they're using that term chaos to describe Trump. They like to do that. But it doesn't apply here. There's no chaos. It's very organized, very, very well executed. I know exactly what led up to it. And now we're waiting to see what Iran's going to do after it.
Yeah, I mean, prior to the strike, Israel and Iran were at war.
Yeah.
After the strike, there's a ceasefire. Will it hold? Who knows? We don't know what's going to happen. But as a member of the United States Senate, and also as someone who has supported, prior Democrat presidents, Clinton, Obama, all of these presidents going back to Bush have wanted to, they all said no nuclear weapons in Iran.
Mm-hmm.
They all were aspirational about achieving no nuclear weapons in Iran. They tried deals, they tried negotiations, nothing worked. So now we have this strike, which I don't care, show me a country that isn't, if they're not openly, isn't reservedly supportive, isn't glad that somebody finally took a bomb to these facilities. So, I find it's almost so knee-jerk, it's so predictable. It would be really interesting to see some unpredictable reaction, to see a Democrat who said, you know what, look, we've all, long wanted to cool things off in this region. And how about the fact that nobody is coming to their defense? Not Russia, not China. None of the axis of evil, maybe it doesn't exist anymore.
Not even their surrogates.
Right. So, it'd be good just to hear a mature sort of reasoned take on this from Mark Kelly as an American who doesn't want to see Iran have nuclear weapons.
So I want you to hear what Anthony Blinken put in the New York Times today in an op-ed. He said, Trump's Iran strike was a mistake. I hope it succeeds. The strike on 3 of Iran's nuclear facilities by the U.S., unnecessary and unwise. Now that it's done, I very hope it succeeds. As of now, there are conflicting messages. If and when it does, we get answers when we would take Tehran 18 to 24 months to produce an explosive device, according to some estimates. In other words, there was still time for diplomacy to work, and the situation wasn't nearly the emergency that Trump portrayed it to be. He said, it underscores that sticking with the JCPOA was the better option. I bought us at least 15 years instead of just a few, and it avoided the risk of Iranian retaliation, such as Monday's missile attacks directed our forces in the region, as well as the potential for further escalation, including threatening global oil flows through the Strait of Hormuz. What's your take?
Has he seen the chart that shows the increase in enriched uranium levels over the past 2 years? It skyrockets at the end of that chart. So, President Obama said it's clear that at the levels they're enriching, they're not interested in an energy program. So they're enriching to levels that can only be on their way to having a nuclear program. The really sad thing for Iran, I don't know. Again, wouldn't it be interesting to hear Antony Blinken? And I guess he's going sort of in that direction when he says, I hope it succeeds. But what it shows is just a lack of guts. Right. We're seeing bold action. Now, bold action sometimes fails, but at least it's bold action. And fortune tends to favor the bold in the world. What we saw and what the contrast is so dramatic in is just the difference in tenor between the last administration and this one.
Oh, yeah.
We see action, action, action. Will it all succeed? Probably not. Will some of it succeed in probably an instrumental way? Probably.
So the JCPOA, let's think about this. You can still use ballistic missiles. We're going to give you pallets of cash because they said it was frozen and it's unfrozen.
No,
so
anywhere, anytime inspection.
So Martha, what did they do with that money? Did they go and build new roads and new playgrounds? No, they gave it to Hezbollah and Hamas to cause more unrest with our only ally, our major democracy in the region on a regular basis. And we did not have eyes on anything. Some of them were just cameras. So we didn't have any Americans there checking everything out. We had to go by what they were saying, the IAEA. The IAEA has been a little dicey with us in the past, and I think we are no American presence. So to me, we basically had a deal that I think was 10 years in duration. And they said, well, once they're part of the family of nations, we're sure they're going to re-up that deal. Really? As an expiration date, and then they can make nuclear weapons. Why would they?
That was the China philosophy that Nixon had, right? And it was an understandable approach to China at the time. The more sunlight that we let in to this communist nation, the more we trade with them, the more we work with them, they'll come around. The spotlight will be on them. They'll have to behave responsibly in terms of human rights and all these other issues. And now, sadly, we see that they are our greatest adversary in the world after all of that. Iran and every U.S. president, Republican, Democrat, has recognized this over the last decades. They need a change at the top. The Islamic regime in place since 1979 is a human rights disaster. Women are not allowed. If your hijab is slightly an inch off and your hair around your ears is showing, you can and do end up in prison, and in one woman's case, dead in a hospital. So let's just, remember the fact that estimates that I'm hearing 80, even 90% of the Iranian public are wanting a change. Now, the president's gone back and forth on the regime change issue over the last few days. It's tricky. It does have to come from within. Even President Bush said it had to come from within way back then. But there is, not only is there no support for the Iranian regime outside of it, there's almost no support inside of Iran for it.
Right. And by the way, what do you think about at Times Square, them rallying for Iran against us in Times Square all weekend?
You know what I really think more than anything, Brian, when I look at this? I think it shows the terrible lack of education in this country. We are not educating our children. Now, you can support Iran if you want to. You have a right to do that in this country. But I think that what we've done is educated an entire generation of young people who just are picking up their information off of TikTok. And they didn't learn it in school. They didn't learn about the 1979 revolution. And you can think whatever you want about it, but understand it. They didn't learn about the creation of Israel after World War II. They don't understand the dynamic of what happened under Hitler. They are very they don't have a good education. I mean, I hate to say that about our own country, but this is true. And I know you've worked to educate people. I have too, by, writing about these things and trying to get people better informed. But it smacks of a very silly, superficial culture that is getting its information off of social media. And it's really a black mark on our education history.
It really is. Joy Reid last night on a CNN panel said, why are we okay to have nuclear weapons and Iran not? He said, we have not been responsible. Remember Hiroshima? Everyone was shocked, including my guest yesterday. So my guest yesterday who said, wait a second, we dropped them. We absolutely had to drop those bombs back then. Since that time, we have led non-nuclear proliferation since. Her view, Joy Reid, a primetime anchor on a major network, has that dim view of America that we can't be more trusted than Iran.
The IAEA, which you talked about moments ago, and people need to understand, it's an agency. Their responsibility was created by Eisenhower. Their responsibility is to do the best they can, understanding how much enriched uranium is out there, where it is, which is a big problem for them right now that they've got to figure out. But their mission is to make sure there are no nuclear accidents in the world and to make sure that we don't see more countries become nuclear capable, weapons capable. So their mission is that Iran not get a nuclear weapon. They do not. There are 9 countries in the world that have nuclear weapons capability, and they don't want there to be any more because it makes the world more dangerous. So if she doesn't understand why a country like the United States is more responsible and is part of these non-nuclear proliferation treaties, and Iran is on the outside of that, I don't know. She's got to go back and start at square zero.
Whoopi Goldberg said it's harder to be a black woman in America than to be a woman in Iran.
I mean, I cannot imagine what she is thinking. I mean, literally, women in Iran, if you show your hair,
right,
you can be beaten and whipped in the streets by these religion police who literally walk around the streets of Tehran looking for you, looking to see if you have a hair out of place so that they can throw you in Evin prison. Evin prison is full of people who have been fighting for freedom. We have so much freedom in this country. Are we perfect? Of course we're not perfect. We try to be a more perfect nation all the time. That's our mission as Americans. But to make that comparison is so reflective of ignorance. I don't even know what else to say.
Absolutely. And by the way, remember she would, if she went to Iran, she does have the outfit from Sister Act. She would just have to leave that on the whole time, and she can't have the white rim.
It was a nun, I think.
It was a nun. But I mean, basically the same outfit. I mean, nun is a little bit more open. All right, so a few more minutes with Martha. She's going to tell us when we get back what's on her show. Also, I want to get her take on the mayor's race and the Democratic primary, which was stunning.
A lot of communications. I think I slept an hour and a half because the phone was going off all night. People understand this moment.
Coming back to you?
In a combination, a lot of people didn't leave. I was not in the primary. They said, Eric, we're going to we're going to endorse in a primary. Let's have another conversation during the general. So there was a lot of people who stated that you're not in a primary. We want to make sure that this candidate does not win. And so now you have almost 1 million independent voters. You have many Democrats.
That was Mayor Eric Adams on the couch with us on Fox and Friends. He was ebullient. He thinks he's got a real shot at re-election, and why not? He says that the Democratic primary that gave us Zohran Mamdani is through of left wing, like a lot of parties, even the national parties, they're for the extremists. That's why Mamdani destroys by 100,000 votes roughly Andrew Cuomo, who's not a wild lefty. He's definitely a Democrat. But Martha MacCallum, Eric Adams really thinks he's got a legitimate shot now. And he says, like Bloomberg and others, they're going to come back to him because they don't want this guy. This guy, Mamdani, is so extreme. Why would anyone vote for him that was a capitalist?
I mean, I think a lot of people were very shocked by Mamdani sort of coming up the side lane like a racehorse who managed to win in the end. He had a very strong social media game. Good advertising. He, sort of presents well. I think that when you go through what he actually stands for, I think a lot of people absolutely shocked. There's absolutely no way financially for him to do the things he's talking about in terms of housing and, free buses and all of this stuff. And his anti-Israel statements are abhorrent. We have a lot of Jewish voters in this city. There's a lot of conservatives who left the city during COVID, and I think that had an impact on Lee Zeldin's race. But all that said, I think that Adams does become the alternative candidate in a very strong way. What impact might it have if President Trump came to New York to campaign for Eric Adams? We know that they have a pretty good relationship. We know that Tom Homan said that, he saw the cop in him when they sat down to talk. And I think that in many ways, Adams is the kind of Democrat that, used to be dominant in New York City. He's big on law enforcement, wants a safe city, but is, liberal and Democrat in other ways in terms of social issues. So I'm shocked. I mean, I thought it was interesting. The Chicago Tribune yesterday, I think, wrote an editorial saying, "Don't make the mistake that we made, New York."
Yeah.
Don't do it. Don't give yourselves a Brandon Johnson. I mean, it is appalling. What would happen to the safety factor in the streets of New York City if you have someone who thinks that, that cops are bad, that they shouldn't coordinate with ICE? I mean, this city has been impacted so dramatically by immigration. We have spent billions and billions of dollars housing people. It is, I will be very surprised if Mamdani can pull out a win in November, but we'll see what happens.
Here is with Arthur Aidala, our good friend, great lawyer who knows New York, Cut 31.
Mm-hmm.
There's no one happier after Mamdani and his family than Eric Adams tonight, because everyone over 50 years old who remembers Times Square in the 1970s and the 1980s when you couldn't walk through, it was all pornography and crack and muggings and rapes and robberies. Everyone who remembers that is going to vote for Eric Adams. The New York Times, who didn't do an endorsement, did say, please don't vote for Mamdani, as did the Daily News, as did the New York Post. So anybody who knows how bad New York can get all came out against Mamdani, because a 33-year-old with zero experience running anything except a little office with 5 employees should not be running the city of New York.
I mean, I couldn't agree more with Arthur Aidala. It honestly, I'm kind of speechless on this. I think it's pretty incredible. But what's happening is you have this, slice. Look across the country. Look at New York. Look at Chicago. Look at Los Angeles. The 3 great, huge, wonderful cities of the United States of America, and look at what has happened to them. And they are sort of this bastion hanging on after a presidential election that saw all the swing states go to Trump. And he'll be the first one to point this out, and he's accurate in doing so, and a popular victory. But you have these islands, these tight islands in our greatest cities that are supporting these very radical candidates.
So who's going to be on your show?
So we are going to speak with Rosanna Scotto about this election in New York. She knows New York better than anybody, so she's going to join us. We also have Brian Mast on. We're going to talk about the Iranian nationals who are getting picked up in this country. Some pretty scary stuff about who crossed over the border in the last administration. Stephen Miran from the White House Council of Economic Advisors is going to join us as well. And we're going to talk about whether or not there will be a vacation for members of Congress, or, as President Trump has said, nobody goes home for a vacation until this bill is done. So we'll see. We'll talk to him about that.
So the big, beautiful bill has got some pushback already from even Speaker Johnson said yesterday, Senate is messing with it. It's a very delicate balance. Don't touch the SALT tax. Don't touch what I gave you for Medicaid. And they're doing both.
Yep. I always think of passing these bills as sort of like a bunch of people sitting on a little raft in the ocean. And if one thing falls off, the whole thing tips over. And that's how hard it is to keep this on balance. They have to, I think, keep their focus on the larger tax cut package that was passed and extending it. That's the priority, I think, for these members. And there's a lot of good things in there for border control as well. So, money, facilities. So we'll see where it goes. But yeah, the Senate loves to deliberate.
They do. The question is, does everyone want to stay on the raft?
Exactly. Thank you for using my metaphor, Brian.
I'm going to use it, and you could use it again in your show at 3 o'clock today at Eastern Time, The Story. Mike Rogers standing by. He wants to be the next senator from Michigan. Got so close last time. Looks like he's got an open seat to go for this time. And Sean Davis is the CEO and co-founder of the Federalist, will be with us too. And then Seth Barron will go up close and personal on what happened with this election, this primary election last night, which leads me to the big three.
Number 3.
Republicans are really beginning to learn how bad the big ugly bill is for them. Republican senators are airing deep concerns behind closed doors, but they're not being honest at home to their constituents.
Chuck Schumer, big beautiful bill concerning, it's careening its way through the Senate. The House is going to get it soon. They want to see what's left. A lot of people are weighing in on it. I'll let you know. This is all Republicans. They can't agree on this. I'll let you know where we stand.
Number 2.
We have won because New Yorkers have stood up for a city they can afford. Will use their power to reject Donald Trump's fascism, to stop mass ICE agents from deporting our neighbors.
Stunning upset in the New York City Democratic primary mayoral race as defamed and disgraced Andrew Cuomo concedes to radical socialist and anti-Semitic Zohran Mamdani, a nondescript assemblyman who never really had a true job before that. This is good news, I believe, for Curtis Sliwa and mostly for Eric Adams. I'll explain.
Number 1.
And the thing that hurts me is it's really demeaning to the pilots and the people that put that whole thing together, the generals. That was a perfect operation.
That is President Trump responding to the report out of one of 17 intelligence agencies, which is, they say, of low confidence. It says the president only set back Iran's nuclear program a couple of months. You know who disagrees with that? Iran and Israel, both of which I believe are on the ground. Let's bring in Mike Rogers, GOP candidate, and he's running for senator, and an FBI guy who's also got a military background. Mike, welcome back. I'll tell you, I don't know exactly how much damage is done. Nobody does to the 12 nuclear sites and the 3 that we hit. But for the DIA to come out, and you know this business and you know the people, to say on low confidence, we only think the centrifuges weren't really hit. We only think not enough was collapsed. We only think they set the program back 2 or 3 months. And it leaks to the same reporters that brought out the Russian hoax and the 51 intel agents that told us the laptop wasn't real. What does that tell you?
None of that smells right to me, Brian, and thanks for having me on. Listen, and all of these things take some time to do, so why they would even get this out this early is beyond me. And you know how this works, but there's all the different ways you collect intelligence on something like this called battle damage assessment, including, by the way, they have ways of seeing through spectrographs what kind of materials are coming out of those holes. So they'll be able to tell through all of that, through human sources that will be picking up information from electronic collection, picking up information, something called MASINT, which is that way of that spectral assessing the kinds of materials coming out of those holes, all of those things. And then, of course, certainly the GEOINT, all of the spatial and photography that happens. It'll take a little bit of time to get the exact assessment. To come out this early is nonsense. And that, one of the best clues ought to be the fact that Iran is reaching back out to the IAEA and saying, okay, we're ready to have talks again. That tells you that it was more than just a small setback in their nuclear program.
It's amazing. Fordo, Natanz, and Esfahan are the places that we targeted. And what they say in the report, they said they did not destroy the core components of the country's nuclear program and likely only set it back months. Now, I'm not going to – that's what they think, and that's – And that's what they think, and you know more about intelligence than I'll ever know. But why they had to rush this out, and if you wonder why President Trump outrages the traditional Washington establishment by questioning the intelligence so often, is because of things like this. This is pure politics. We got to rush this out. President's going to a NATO summit to get ahead of them and force the narrative to defend the attack and the effectiveness instead of what it means for the region and the country. That's why he keeps the circle so tight. That's why he gutted so many people. And that's why he doesn't always thinks twice before he looks at the intelligence that he gets. It's a bad place we're in.
Yeah, no, I agree. And why somebody thinks that they should have put that out to influence policy tells me they ought to be fired, if not in jail, honestly.
What do you think, Mike, as a guy that's been on the House Select Intelligence Committee? What do you think about the president's decision?
I think it was exactly the right decision. So when I left the chairmanship in 2014, we knew a couple of things. That Iran had a ballistic missile program, got to have that. They had enrichment capability, by the way, which the Obama administration let them keep in the deal, which allowed them to continue to enrich to weapons grade, which, in and of itself was a disaster. And we knew that they had supercomputers and modeling so that you could form that material on the top of a missile. And so people say, well, nobody tested it. Well, nowadays, you don't really need to test it if you have these supercomputers that can do this modeling in the way that we knew Iran had this capability through supercomputers. That was 10 years ago. So think about it. You're damn right they had the capability. And what I think the Israelis saw was increased activity around there when the Israelis were having success with their anti-missile systems, meaning they were accelerating their ability to get it. Because wouldn't that be interesting, announcing I have a bomb right in the middle of all of this? This is absolutely a nation that cannot get it. I mean, they've killed lots of Americans. I mean, we all know the list, including the 243 U.S. Marines they bombed in Beirut and that they killed. The U.S. soldiers in Iraq through introducing these very sophisticated IEDs. These are the main sponsors of terrorism in the Middle East and the main cause for chaos, and they wanted a nuclear bomb. Can't let that happen. I don't think we had a big window. I think the president took it under exigent circumstances and said, right, let's disrupt the nuclear program, and by the way, let's try to pursue peace after that. That's exactly what he's doing. And here's one last thing that drives me crazy. Let's just say they didn't get all of it. They didn't get 90%. They got 70% of the program. If you find other places where they're trying to put it back together, that gives us a whole nother set of options. We didn't have those options before all this happened. So how any analyst could come out, and analysts is where you get in trouble. It's not the operators. It's always the analysts that screw this stuff up. And then somebody thinks that they're smarter than the world and has to leak it. Boy, that's why that stuff is so dangerous, and that's why they need to pursue an investigation on who did that.
So on behalf of the Israeli Atomic Energy Commission, they just put this out. The devastating U.S. strike on Fordo destroyed the site's critical infrastructure and rendered the enrichment facility inoperable. We assessed that the American strikes on Iran's facilities, combined with Israel's strikes on other elements of their nuclear program, has set back Iran's ability to develop nuclear weapons by many years. This achievement can continue indefinitely if Iran does not get access to nuclear material. And then the Rafael Grossi weighed in here with Martha yesterday, cut 10.
The Iranian nuclear program has been set back significantly. It is clear that there is one Iran before June 13, nuclear Iran, and one now. And it's night and day. It's a new reality now. Iran has far less capabilities than it had in the past.
So what changes now? We know the president of Iran says he wants to go back to talks. Since 1979, we've had the same story with Iran. They're just different presidents and different levels of threat. So tell me, can you look ahead, Mike Rogers, and tell me what you expect the tone and tenor to be going forward?
Well, I mean, the fact that they want to talk, if I'm an eternal optimist, I think that's a good sign. But what we have to do as a country is not be willing to play the game we've played for the last 30 years, which is, give them a little bit here. Don't worry about it. Appeasement. The Obama administration would give them cash for hostages. I mean, all of that has just strengthened Iran. This ought to be a negotiation where you've just lost. And now we're going to accept what Iran looks like without nuclear weapons. Let's have that negotiation. And I'm not talking about, the Ayatollah has to walk up with his hands up in the air, although that would be a nice day for the world probably. But I'm just talking about the fact that they can't have this nuclear capability, and we have to defang their Quds Force and IRGC in the way that they've been sponsoring terrorism around the world. And the exporting of this missile technology. There's really key components here that we can get in a negotiation. If they really want peace, then they have to stop exporting terror, violence, and death. And I'd start there. And if they are not willing to do that, then I think you got to let Israel continue to do what Israel does to try to degrade their ability to cause death and destruction across the Middle East. And by the way, the world, because they're sharing that technology with North Korea, with Russia. I mean, this is a bad regime that survives on exporting violence, and that has to come to an end.
It's just amazing. Look, I want the press to do reports, ask tough questions. I want to do the same thing when I talk to the president. But you got to be able to answer the questions and also at least approach it where you could say, I need to get answers rather than try to skew the American public. Here's an example of a clueless reporter that probably doesn't know she's clueless. Erin Burnett talking about Iran. I guess trying to paint Iran as the good guys. Listen to this, cut 23.
I remember, Dan, at one point being in Tehran years ago, and they're chanting death to America all around me, even as I say, oh, I'm an American reporting for CNN, and they were happy to speak to me. So that those two is sort of jarring realities of the chant, and yet the friendliness have existed together.
Just, I want to kill you, but I also like to shake your hand. Did you really think that was a clarifying moment that you needed to share? I mean, how crazy is that?
It just sounds absurdly naive, honestly. You have a nation, listen, this is the same nation that in 2009, when people who probably did want to walk up and shake her hand, who had nothing to do with the government, are just trying to survive, decided to stand up, and the Obama administration turned their back on them, and they got beaten and thrown in prison and killed and took missing from the Iranian intelligence and defense services. It's a theocracy basically run by the military and intelligence services. So when they say death to America, that's a chant paid for, sponsored by the intelligence services, who really mean death to America. So it just sounds so absurd to me that they would say, well, I found one nice guy that shook my hand. Yeah, there are Iranians who don't want to live under the theocracy. They don't have a choice. And right now, the people who have control of the weapons and the terror export plots all happen to be in power. That's who you're negotiating with. That's who you have to deal with. And the reality is you have to defang that. And how that goes, I think, is going to be important in these negotiations. But you have to give some leeway here to get that done. And I'm not talking about boots on the ground. I mean, everybody always defaults, oh, this is a big act of war, and they're going to suck us into World War III. That's not going to happen. We've been in a proxy war with Iran, the rest of the world, I'm talking, not just us, but Israel, our Arab League partners for the last 20, 30 years. I mean, we've all been victims of this stuff, and now I think it's just this rare, unique opportunity because we showed strength, which is really important. You can't have peace without strength. It's peace through strength. This is the strength part that people, I think, don't really understand the purpose of it. And it's not tanks over the border. It is surgical strikes, decapitate their capability to go nuclear, which was their big umbrella for more violence. Now let's sit down and talk. You want to be peaceful? That's great. But we're not tolerating it anymore. So let's have a real conversation. I think that's what President Trump has just done. He set up that negotiation in a way we can actually win it for the future of peace and prosperity, not only in the region, for the rest of the world.
I want you to see ICE arrested 16 Iranian nationals illegally in the U.S. since Sunday. It's estimated we have at least 700 who came over the last 4 years, some of which were snipers from their intelligence agencies. Got a 45-year-old who was previously convicted of assault with a deadly weapon. So the list goes on. I love the way the FBI is responding directly to the threat. Sleeper cells are a worry. Are they a worry for you with your FBI background?
Yeah, I'll tell you this. In the first Gulf War, I was a young FBI agent working organized crime in Chicago, and we all got a stop work order. Everybody collapsed on trying to find, surveil, and determine what the plots were for Iraqi, at the time, sleeper cells. Yes, they exist. Now, the interesting thing about the Iraqis is that it wasn't philosophically based. So they got here and were here for 10 years and decided they liked America, didn't do some of the orders that they were given. I think is kind of comical. You won't find that with the Iranians. Those same sleeper cells are here, but they are fanatics, and that's the difference. That's why we worry more about Iranian sleeper cells, because they will do it, and they'll do it for a whole, for religious reasons, which is very, very different than the Iraqis that we were chasing around in Chicago back in the first Gulf War. So yeah, absolutely. And it's we have 2 million people that got in and got away that we don't know who they are. We don't know what country they came from. We don't know what their intentions are. They're all over the country, and that just absolutely taxes our resources.
I know you're running for Senate again. You're trailing, I guess, to the early polls by 1.5% to Haley Stevens. What's going to be the difference this time?
Well, first of all, that was a Democrat-skewed poll. They oversampled Democrats. So a Republican normally starts out, and as a matter of fact, the last go-round, I started out 8 points down, and I got within 0.3% in winning that race. About 230 votes separated us per county, if you can think of that. So we're using that momentum. We believe right now we are in the best shot we've ever had in 32 years to take back this seat. Great name ID. If we just get 85% of people who already voted for us, this is the key, to come back out and vote, we have enough votes in the bank for people who already voted for us.
Well, you'd be a huge asset in the Senate. Mike Rogers, thanks so much. He's a GOP candidate.